crunch, and crunch squish. It's not. Okay, so, let's see. Basic housekeeping stuff. We do these chats in voice, and if you are not comfortable in voicing, that is absolutely fine. I am happy to read typed comments for those who are playing along only in voice. Just write a C or a Q for a comment or question in local chat. And Will is throwing out some TVs. Excellent. And this probably isn't going to be quite as rough as the last several conversations, but the disclaimer still stands. If you find something really interesting, but don't particularly feel like talking about it in public, even in chatting, feel free to IM me either now or after. I'm happy to have private conversations. If the conversation wanders into territory that makes you feel really uncomfortable, by all means, throw me an IM, and I can either talk you down or walk you, sort of steer the conversation in a different direction. The last thing I ever want to do is make someone feel uncomfortable or trigger people. Or this is a place for free and open discussion, and I'm all for that. But I don't want to end up, with people rocking in the corner, muttering, "There's no place like home. There's no place like home." I mean, if something is freaking you out, throw me an IM. We'll deal with it. It is not just fine; it is encouraged. Welcome, Lacey.
Thank you, sir.
So today's conversation is is about mindfuckery, cyberplay, phone sex, and written sex. The forms of interaction and play that are BDSM related but take place in your mind and the mind of your partner rather than physically. Obviously, that's part of every play. But there are, and we can talk about challenges, we can talk about difficulties, safety, techniques, little tricks, things to enhance the play, and I'm thrilled to hear people's suggestions, and if the conversation gets hijacked and goes wandering off in a weird direction, that is fantastic. So feel free to change lanes without signaling and just tangent if it's germane to the conversation. Even if it's Sarah? I'll start with my usual pontificating self and we'll go from there. I actually, one of the things that got me thinking about this topic was a song that I heartily recommend by Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits from his album Sailing to Philadelphia. And it is a song about the first meeting. Yes, Sailing to Philadelphia is an awesome song. was a song about the first meeting, sort of in the Old West, or the Old Midwest, of two people who had only known each other by letter. And the first line of which is, I only knew her by letter when I saw her step off of the train. And it is about falling in love at a distance and the uncertainty that he feels. And the story of them building a life together. But it sort of reinforced to me that there is, and the song is called Prairie Wedding. And it is, it made me realize that, I'm a history geek among other types of geeks, and it reinforced the fact that for hundreds of years or longer, people have fallen in love and built relationships at a remote distance by letter, and we are sort of blessed with living in this golden age where we can not only build those kind of relationships and romantic relationships and love, but we can also play at a distance and we can sort of build incredibly intimate relationships that aren't necessarily great loves, although they can be, but also two ships that pass in the night, without having to wait months between letters or years, which is awesome. Yay, electricity. Very true, resident. And the, having cyber sex by Morse code wasn't a walk in the park either. And just, people have been having phone sex and, since about 10 seconds after, Alexander Graham Bell said, Watson, come, I need you. In fact, that may have been the first Watson. So, the fundamental hooks to building a relationship at a remote that way are imagination, obviously, and empathy. And the third one is honest communication. Getting off is not the hard part. In terms of building a relationship, clearly this is a great form. I'm talking about SL, because you have a physical representation. I am old enough to have been pre-internet, so my introduction was by phone. But there are some fundamentals that have always been true. And the part that people often don't think about is it's easy to get off, especially with a partner helping you. That's not the hard part. But to improve the sex, the relationship, the play, the dominance, the submission, whatever it is, the part that's often tricky for people, especially people who this often comes up for submissives because they are not used to putting themselves forward. They're either shy or not confident, or certainly happens to doms too, that it is hard to be accurate reporting for your own feelings and to critique interactions in a way that lets your interactions get better. I jokingly refer to it as the post-game show. After play or whatever, it's, what hit you hardest, what, it's the sideline interview. How, what fell off, what made you feel safe, what made you feel most loved, what made you feel uncomfortable, but in a good way, and what made you feel uncomfortable in a not so good way, things like that. And Rick has a comment.
Yeah, I find the best way to drive out fear for this kind of communication is to explain to the submissive why it's a service to engage in this kind of dialogue. I always explain it to them that if I have an idiot light in my car, by the time the light comes on, I have to pull over now. Which is kind of the equivalent of safe wording, that, the safe word comes out and everything comes to a halt. And that's not good enough in my book. I want a full instrumentation car. I want to watch that temperature gauge climb slowly and be able to make the decision while I'm towing a boat uphill. That's why it's running a little hot, or something's wrong, I need to stop and add water, but I can wait till after work because it's climbing slowly. The water isn't as low. It's not making it an immediate thing, and that I want a full instrumentation sub that reports status constantly on all of her gauges. And I find I have a lot of success with driving out fear that way by explaining why it's a service. And I'm done.
Yes, and that is a great technique. You aren't telling me for you. You are telling me for me and for us. One of the things that I like to emphasize in these sort of interactions is, in a way, it's a threesome. There's you, there's me, and there's us. And sometimes the needs of us, the two of us together in a relationship, and the needs of the relationship may be different than those of us individually. And so there are, emphasizing that as a service act is often helpful to get over that initial thing. Also, a lot of people are just not used to talking about themselves intimately, but not sexually. People who have zero problem talking about how hard they are, or how excited they are, or, that there are, have enormous problems just reporting how they feel, especially strong emotions, and especially negative emotions. And one of the things as a dominant one can do to really undercut that fear is, even if the feedback is harsh, to thank and reward your partner for the feedback, for taking the risk, for being honest, for caring enough about us to give me feedback that may be hurtful, but is good for us. And that takes an enormous and weird sort of heroism that is an enormous hill to climb for some people. And Faith. Comment? She's not ready. I will. Okay. Rick. Then we'll come back to Faith.
Yeah, I think it's important not just to reward the content, but to emphasize recognize the timing of the content. In the beginning of a relationship, one of the most common things to come out of my mouth is, why wasn't I informed of this sooner? A lot of people, I feel, mistake the communication with the conversation, and they say it's not appropriate to talk about it right now, therefore I'm not going to inform my partner right now. If I hurt Tandy's feelings in this discussion, the time for her to tell me I hurt her feelings is now, so that I can take a mental snapshot of the situation, and later on when we have the conversation, because it's not appropriate for us to have the conversation here and now, I'm aware of, oh yeah, I do recall doing that, as opposed to going, what are you talking about? And so, a big thing with me is, why wasn't I informed of this sooner? She can say, look, I've got something I need to talk to you about, but I can't quite put it into words right now. At least she's informed me that something's stirring in her mind, and that there's a conversation coming later. So I think it's a mistake to confuse the conversation with the transmission of data, so to speak. And I'm done.
Yeah, I think that is true. And one of the best things you can do to encourage that communication is to encourage your partner to say, and to say yourself, I'm upset about something, or something doesn't feel quite right. I haven't quite processed it enough to be able to talk about it. So I want to flag this and put a pin in it so we can come back to it later. Don't let me, this next time we're talking, or next time we're talking, and I'm ready and have thought it through. Let's talk about this. And the flip side is also true. If my partner is upset, while nurturing and comforting them and making them feel safe and loved and encouraged, no problem. One of the things that I try to do, and I'm not perfect at it by any stretch of the imagination, is to open the door to talk about it later, to be like, are you okay with talking about this right now? Because if my partner is upset enough that this is something that is clearly needs to be discussed, it's often not particularly helpful to say, okay, we need to talk about this now, because in effect you are training your partner not to signal how upset they are. And that's not helpful. So you are much better off, giving them room to pick the time. But that way you have made sure you have recognized that their panic or fear or discomfort has been heard, which is the first step, and that you are agreeing to dive into it and try to work on it. And that is the second part. So that's sort of the flip side of what Rick's saying, but is also, sort of absolutely true. And you can just post your comment when you are ready. If it's okay, I'm gonna just get some other people's comments while you're working. Excellent. Rosa.
Oh, thank you. Communication is just absolutely essential in this venue that we're working in. It's, in my opinion, a shared responsibility. We stress that for the slaves that we work with. It's an essential responsibility to inform us of things that might affect our dynamic so that we can make responsible choices. And when I say we, I refer to my community, because we have a poly practice there. able to describe action, describe feelings, thoughts, emotions via text or via voice, or a combination thereof, is a skill that has to be trained, and it can be such fun training. For an example, having a slave present themselves and describe from foot to head their body as they offer it to the dominant before them. But without that communication, as we express it verbally and through written communication here, because we don't have body language. With voice we have intonation, but it's still so easy to misinterpret that. It's a skill, and I view as a dominant, it's part of my responsibility to teach that skill. Thanks, I'm done.
Thank you. Yes, and that is a great point and a great exercise. Like a trust exercise that I have used with partners is getting them to help get them talk about uncomfortable things. I'm a daddy dom mostly, so we generally call it confession, because there's a very fine line between forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, and I've been naughty, Daddy. And we doing something like expressing in the most honest way possible 3 things you don't like about your body, or 3 things you don't like about your personality, or 3 things you have been embarrassed by. And rewarding them for the discussion of it while interceding about the phrasing, which is often incredibly self-destructive. So by doing that, what you've done a combination of encouraging the communication and being supportive while showing the care and the encouragement and the nurturing that comes from saying, hey, that is unfair to you. Even if the truth on the ground is as bad as you think it is, that is not a healthy way to express it. And to just to make the giving of the comments safer, and also to show your care and nurturing by interceding on their behalf against their own self-attack. Does that make sense? I realized about halfway through that I sort of couldn't tell if I repeated myself or just wandered off in the corner. Okay, excellent. Awesome. I'll face comment. With the imaginative play and talking about how long-distance loves, found online to be specific, can be omega strong, and again, if you are lucky to meet in person, that some of the work is almost done. But bonds tend to be stronger, and I believe that wholeheartedly. And speaking about how we all, sub-dom, human alike, tend to feel shy about sharing things, and we do not always disclose who we are, what we like, what we feel, and what we want. I am an AOL child, and chat rooms were my friend. Growing up, I had always felt uncomfortable with speech. I have a lisp that comes out from time to time. My voice, many other things tend to make me feel uncomfortable. I've always felt like my thoughts get jumbled, and that's because I feel nervous, and it stems from no one really wants to hear my opinion or what I have to say. AOL had provided a chat room forum, and I am for that fun cyber lovely sex play, learning how to curate words and find words for how you feel. When coming to SL many years ago, I wanted to find that AOL chat room side to things, where people would like to roleplay, and oh my god, there are animations to go with it. I find that many individuals here rely solely on the pose, and ohs and ahs and oh my gods. It's rare to find someone who ignites that flame in you to keep writing, to dig deep into, in a way, expose yourself and be vulnerable and honest. Not worrying exactly about spelling after a while when you're in headspace and you know you're both connected and finding that bridge to togetherness. I think all that we do that connects us, good, bad, and different, is mindfuckery, because we make another person feel some kind of way. Anyway, I hope some of that makes sense. It is just hard to find someone who is willing to go further than the pose ball and actually spend time and energy to create, imagine, even write a beautiful scene. All right, that was amazing. First of all, yes. I had some speech issues early as well. I ended up sort of overcoming it and doing radio and sort of sink or swim. But yes, and AOL was a place that a lot of people got their sort of feet wet. And in effect, because you didn't have the visual stimulus, because even if an avatar doesn't look anything like the person behind it, and if it does, what are you doing here and not modeling? The choices you make in building an avatar say something about you. The way you choose to present yourself. In effect, you are declaring what you find attractive in representing you. But the spoken and written word in intimate interactions like this are they are your face. They are your first impression. They are your introduction to friends, associates, potential partners, whatever, in this world, in the cyber world. And as a result, you end up, I wish I could go back in time and tell, like, my high school friends, like, dude, pay attention in English. It'll make the sex so much better. Because that's the only thing that would inspire high school students. And I say that as someone who writes for a living. So, yes, thank you for that. That was fantastic. And, Tandy, did you retract that comment? Was that what that all was?
I did retract, thank you.
Okay. Then the chair does not recognize me. Rick.
Yeah, a couple things. I want to go back to where we started for a while, and then I want to comment on what Faith said. The beauty, the true beauty of having your partner tell you the moment they feel something, what's going on, and gaining the trust that you will discuss it at a later date, allows for amazing things to happen. You are actually capable of having a disagreement and still going to the discussion you plan to go to and the dance you were planning on going to, and come home and having a calm discussion about the disagreement you had earlier without it ruining your entire evening. It's actually even possible, believe it or not, for your sub to come to you and say, I'm upset about something, and you to say, right after Star Trek, we'll discuss this, and her to smile and cuddle up on the couch next to you, because she knows that you're going to have that conversation. And it's not that Star Trek's more important than her, it's just that, Star Trek's on right now, and the conversation can wait because she's giving you the information before it's boiled over. So I think it's such an awesome communication skill to develop between as far as the role playing. Bravo. I sex in real life, you should cyber, because it's the one time you can read your partner's mind. You find out things about your partner that you never knew. You always knew she was in the handcuffs. Now you know it's the sound of the ratcheting of the cuffs that really drives her crazy. And now you can get chains and pulleys involved in other sex, and they spice it up with these sounds that turn her on. So it's the one time you can your partner's mind is when you're role playing with them, and I think that's a beautiful insight into your partner's mind.
Absolutely. And if you were lucky enough to live with your partner, hell, go to different rooms and have phone sex. You'll learn a lot. Yeah, it is. It is. In a weird way, what pops to mind is it is the difference between being in sort of diagnostics. It's the difference between being a doctor and being a veterinarian. Veterinarians, like people who have their partners having sex with them in the same room, generally don't get a verbal report of what's wrong. You have to, you have to dig in the moment and try to figure it out. Doctors get a report from their conversation, from their patients, and it makes the process much easier. So if you're interacting with a partner in a way that makes them self-report, even if it's ooh, ah, oh my, OMFG, whatever, you're still getting self-described feedback. And that's very important. That's a great idea. Tizzy.
Yeah, I just want to put a shout out there for the large proportion of submissives that have absolutely no problem talking and reporting and all the other words that you've used. I'm sitting here thinking that you're making submissive sounds like spineless doormats at the minute. And also that I find that, personally, I find that it's men, and seeing as a lot of men that I interact with claim dominance, that it's men that have difficulty opening up about their feelings and, reporting at the time what is going on and all that kind of thing. So I just wanted to put that out there for us outspoken submissives that have no problem, telling it how it is when it is. I'm done, thank you.
First of all, bless you for being that way. And yes, and in fact, I did not mean to make this. I should have brought up sort of the gender issue, because it is often a real problem with submissive men, and it's an enormous problem with dominant men, because dominant men often feel like, I'm going to generalize, shocker, it's not like I haven't been this entire time, but dominant men who embrace traditional gender roles are generally not encouraged to talk about their feelings. Yes, that's very true, so. societally, and by the way, I mean don't, are societally and through gender roles not expected to be talking about feelings, not expected to be intelligent about it, which is insane. Um, you know, at some fundamental level, if your partner has never seen you, has never interacted with you while you are crying, they don't know you as well as you think they do. So yes, thank you very much for that. I am going to switch Pat's fate while she's typing and go to Rick again.
Yeah, I know that for men, discussing their feelings can be difficult because we're expected to cowboy up, and I want to point out that, and I admit I'm overgeneralizing here, but when the female's being emotional, it's probably a good idea for the man to cowboy up. There's time for him to discuss his feelings, but maybe it's not a good idea for you to both be crying at the same time. So, cowboying up, I think, is an important skill for a male to have. But cowboying up all the time is hiding, and I don't necessarily agree with that. And Tandy has this sneaky thing that she does to get me to want to talk about things like this, and that's that she serves me. No matter, I tell her that I'm feeling sad, she gets on the internet and finds jokes, and she doesn't let it spool her up that I'm not laughing at the joke, because I told her I was feeling sad. So it doesn't bother her I'm not laughing at the joke. She'll read the jokes to me until I tell her to stop, because she's trying to cheer me up. And just the act of her trying to do that cheers me up, plus the fact that, be good with finding jokes that are actually funny. She understands my sense of humor. So, something I tell her is that everything I tell her tends to come back to me tenfold. That makes me want to communicate with her. Often in relationships, demands are made of a partner without the other person behaving in such a way that makes the partner want to do it. I've heard submissives demand to be cherished. Well, then behave cherishable. You want your partner to communicate with you, make it a pleasure for him. And he's more likely to open up because he gets something out of it. He gets a return on his investment. And yes, men tend to be more closed-mouthed. It's a skill that we need to develop. It's a skill that's not well trained in it. And I'm done.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that there are real I sort of think of this as one of those ways that some insane percentage of men go out of the way to make the few who are reasonably open to discussing emotions and feelings look really good in comparison. So, did you have another comment besides the having difficulty expressing feelings, but absolutely not spiteful? Okay, I'm going to let her jump back in. Okay. Listen.
Oh, thank you again. And I apologize if I bounce around a little bit. There's been several really fascinating statements made, and I won't go back and see if I can grab some of them. And first of all, anything that I say refers only to my own experience. I don't mean to suggest that it's right or appropriate for anyone else. I kind of specialize in male submissives, although we also have male and female slaves. And I have yet to meet a spineless male submissive. It takes a great deal of courage to be a male submissive from the time that their submission first expresses on out, because it's invisible, in my opinion. They are one of the most marginalized still groups within edge experiences, marginalized groups. So there are no role models, or there were none, for many of our slaves in their 40s and 50s and 60s. Now there's the internet, and that's been profoundly affirming for so many of them that I see and I work with. But if I take spineless out of my experience, I still find multiple different levels of skill in communication. One of the traits that I find really impacts this, in my experience, is the level of introversion a person has, which seems to translate pretty congruently from real life into Second Life. I find on my Second Life path, I have met a very large number of introverts, and I count myself as one of them, though I've learned many extroverted skills to execute my job. Still, though, being able to be present with a thought and express it and stay present with the response of the person who you're communicating to is something that has to be developed and trained. So with that, I'm checking to see, I'm kind of missing a couple of things, but I'll say that I'm done, and I'll put a C in if those thoughts come back to me. Thanks.
Yeah, please do, because there's absolutely a loop around for things. And, I mean, at some fundamental level, spineless isn't necessarily fair. And your point about male submissives is a good one. Because of societal expectations, for a male to come out as, in traditional gender roles, for a male to come out as submissive is, especially a straight male, is sort of a rare and wonderful thing, and takes enormous courage because of the backlash against it. It's sort of like coming out as gay or lesbian in the Deep South in the United States. It's just, there's gonna be blowback. And, so yes, your point's an excellent one. And please feel free to dive in and come back around. Willow.
Hi. Thank you. I've got a couple ideas, and I'm going to try to put them in a linear sense. I think sometimes we are just as guilty as the vanilla world in that we try to classify and have assigned roles. Dominant, submissive, male, female. It's the way that we categorize things in life, and when people speak in general, you tend to speak from your own perspective because it's what you know. But I think as a community, we need to stop hearing with these preconceived ideas of how it's meant. Because we're all humans first. Dominant, submissive, male, female, gender fluid, homosexual, binary, whatever. We're all humans, and there's at least two people that are in that dynamic. So they're not going to be a totally great communicator or a terribly crappy communicator or a very strong person or a very not strong person, because we're all these things. So I like doing discussions like, it might be, say, a dame that's speaking, and she might be talking about her male submissives. And I know that she's talking about her male submissives, but I can still take the context of what's being said and apply it to my own life or not apply it to my own life. So I think as a whole, sometimes we need to just remember, we get defined enough from the outside. We need to not define or get stuck in pigeonholes. because that's, you stop communicating when that happens in discussions, but also in dynamics. And I think I'm done. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and that's a great thing to keep in mind, sort of for all these discussions, and outside of these discussions, that you know, that one size does not fit all. One label, you know, labels mean entirely different things to different people. I should stop referring to talks we've already had because that's not particularly helpful, but I'm not going to stop. We discussed the sort of utility and the downfall of sort of labels and pigeonholing in a previous discussion. Andy.
Thank you, Sir Rick. Let's be honest, as submissives and as women, we tend to want a strong man, and I'm using air quotes over the strong man. Society often defines a strong man as one who always cowboys up. He always keeps his emotions in check, is even and level-headed, unflappable. And it's our fault in a way that some men find it difficult to communicate, as ours as women and ours as society, really. And even in recent years, some of that has changed, but I've heard many male dominants joking about modern-day men being metrosexual or emo, and we owe it to the men that we serve to make communicating, all communicating, good or bad, okay. We owe it to them not to overreact, not to fly off the handle like Linda Blair in The Exorcist, and to remain in our submissive role. My master's told me several times that being who I am, no matter how he's feeling, is what helps him to be able to talk, able to come out of his funk or make it through something. If I suddenly flew into a panic visibly, or if I started mothering him or soothing him with a there on his back, if I used his weakness as a chance to misbehave or get away with things, etc., he'd be far less likely to communicate out of concern that he would open the door for that to happen. The challenge for us is to be there without changing who we are. I think for me even, it's important for me if I'm going through something, if I'm going through changes, and change is very, very difficult for me, I need things to be normal everywhere else that they can possibly be normal. And by normal, I mean, that even, steady, routine things. I don't want things to suddenly change in my relationship because I'm going through something else elsewhere. I need something to be normal. Some days I have, and I've even said that to my master, I've had a rotten day. Things are just crazy. Something's, going on, changing. Something's really sort of upsetting my apple cart. And I come into Second Life, and then the discussion we usually go to is canceled, and we hang out with some people that I don't really know. And all of a sudden, like, I've lost even just this little part of my day, which usually is, the same. And when that happens, it just completely throws me off even more. So even myself as a submissive, I need that sort of status quo to sort of get back on track again, to sort of keep myself going, and just to have that one little corner of something that's always there. And I think that's kind of how I view my role with Sir Rick when something's going on in his life, is I feel like I need to maintain who I am so that he has, that one thing, if nothing else is going right for him, he has that one thing that's going to be the same no matter what. That person who's going to serve him, whether he's in a funk or not in a funk, that person who's going to kneel at his feet and talk to him like she does every single night when other things around him aren't going so well. And I'm done. Thank you.
And at a fundamental level, what you just described is simply, is not dominant or submissive, but is being a good partner and a loving partner, and being supportive and being there for what your partner needs, and having a good partner who's there for what you need. For that many people. And yeah, that was beautiful. And every time you say so, Rick. And I'm like, what? No, I don't know her. She's not mine. I do. Speaking of which, Rick.
Yeah, I think it's easy to speak of the evils of pigeonholing, and it's certainly used maliciously at times. But I think it's important to realize there needs to be a balance between pigeonholing and not forcing somebody into a pigeonhole, because a lot of the English language requires you to take what I'm saying in context. If I say the sky is blue in this room, I'm probably going to get a lot of nods of agreement, whereas if we were having a scientific discussion, the sky is certainly not blue. It's a fraction of light waves through the atmosphere, you know, and the blue spectrum is the one that's easiest to be seen. So, you know, in context, the sky is blue. Because this is our experience, unless you're colorblind, that you look up and you see the color blue. But in another context, the sky is certainly not blue, and I'm relying on you all to kind of pigeonhole what I'm saying into the conversation that we're saying, to take your own experiences and go, you know what, I agree with, or I disagree, or to take what I'm saying in context of the conversation that we're having. So I'm relying on you to make judgment calls. I'm relying on us not having to refine every word sentence every time we communicate. Pigeonholing is critical to conversation. It's just a matter of me not holding you to that pigeonhole. And I'm done.
Yes, and, you know, one of the points is that it doesn't, it's a different experience for everyone, and there is it's interesting we're talking about, you know, communication, and an important part of that is sort of not pigeonholing and sort of misconstruing what's said, and I think that's absolutely true. Rosa.
Thank you. My mind just came so alive at listening and thinking about Tandy's comment. I'm not sure if I heard it right. I think she might have said that all women prefer strong men. I don't know if there's any qualifiers in there. And then I had to start asking myself, well, Rosa, what do you prefer? And what does strong mean to you? And honestly, I didn't catch that. I wanted to go back and clarify. I want whether a man or a woman in real life or in second life, I want somebody who is a well-defined person, not necessarily a complete person, depending upon their path of development that they're going to share with me and trust to me to some extent. And oddly, Danny, I think you've heard me talk about my grandfather before. I look at being very influenced by my grandfather, who was a complex man. He was a submissive man, though who the fuck would have known it 40 years ago, 30 years ago? But I can look back and say he was a submissive man living in a household that was defined by matriarchy, my great-grandmother and my grandmother, and he taught me many lessons. But one of the most important ones was his ability to be present with me. And Rick, I think it was you. Sorry if I'm missing giving the credit. You talked about being a good partner. We want somebody who is a good partner. That's going to be unique to each of us, but that was a very insightful statement, I think, for whatever that might be for us uniquely. We want somebody who's going to be a good partner within our dynamic, within the other kinds of partnerships that we sustain. Thank you, and I'm done. Thanks for that thought-inspiring comment, Andy.
Yes, I was talking about supporting partners. And yes, there is, you know, it is, if you decide, if you define strength as doing what's right for yourself and the people you care about, then strength can take the form of absolute submission and, you know, and being a devoted slave and, or 1,000 other facets. And this is actually getting back to that conversation we had several weeks ago about terms being slippery. Strong is one of those terms that mean different things to different people. That's funny. I was thinking about matriarchy. Your point triggered one of mine, which was George Bush Sr. just died, and his wife was the matriarch of the Klan and ruled it with an absolutely iron fist in some fairly unpleasant ways, clearly. But you know, you cannot argue that there were not strong men in that family, him included. But it was also clear who was in charge. So, yes, and Rick had a comment, and yes, we can get to Mindfucks. Sorry, Keith.
Well, I just wanted to point out, I'm a big believer in universal truths, and I think Rick's always class up a place, and I just wanted to point out how grateful we all should be that we have two. And I'm done.
Amen. So, I mean to snort in everyone's ear. Mindfuckery. And feel free to loop it back about earlier comments or issues or as we discuss it. It seems to me that the fundamental hook of a nice, deep, exciting mindfuck, and a safe one that doesn't do damage, is finding an exciting fear in your partner and exploiting it is a loaded word, but thank you. But exploiting it for their excitement. And I was inspired, influenced by a in-person mindfuck that I was a minor player in. This is 30 years ago now. That was a bestiality scene with a dom and her slave who was blindfolded and bound. And my role was simply to lead the dog into the room. The slave in question had no way of knowing that the dog was female and didn't even have a penis. And they had been playing with concepts around it for a long time, and she had sort of primed her slave's pump, you will forgive the term, for weeks about this. And the mindfuck wasn't that she was going to be mounted. It was breaking her through to the point where she was begging for me. And that's where she brought her back out of the scene. The breakthrough and the mindfuck was not just in the acceptance of it, but in the eagerness. And it was so masterfully done, and so beautifully prepped. In terms of the scene was completely safe physically, and this, juggling on a unicycle on the edge of a cliff emotionally. And that was that sort of is my yardstick. That's the home run. That's the, teach me Obi-Wan. And so that was my, not introduction to mindfuckery. I don't think you can sort of be an intellectual and sort of pull Dom without being mindfuckery, not someone who pushes people into other things, but sort of inspires and seduces and corrupts them. I'm sorry, Tizzy had a comment.
Comment and question, really. With this kind of thing, there surely must have to be some kind of collaborative suspension of disbelief. So how does it work? If you are, especially when you're talking about physical interactions, if you're playing with somebody, then you must trust that person to know where you'll go, know your limits and where you won't go. So how does it work? Because surely you'd go, well, they would never do that, because then that would be breaking my trust, and then they're not the person that I thought they are. So I suppose it's a question to people that have this done to them. You know it's not going to happen. So why do you get something out of it? I suppose by
Anticipation.
to it, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
but it's not anticipation, is it? Like the one that I hear quite often is knife play, blah 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 blah, and then use a butter knife. Well, if your limit is that you're not going to get caught, and somebody does that, then surely it's just going to be, oh, that's just a butter knife, because I know they're not going to cut me. Therefore, what's the payoff, kind of thing? I'm done.
Yes. And that is absolutely true, and it does take an enormous amount of trust and some suspension of disbelief. But, like in the example I was talking about, extreme no it may win, it is not that you have to suspend disbelief so much as you just need to allow a little uncertainty. Not that they're going to gut you like a fish, in the example of night play, but that it is a real knife, or you believe it could be a real knife, and something could go wrong. Something big. But just a little bit of uncertainty can open up the door for great excitement, and often it is with things that are not hard limits. So, there are forms of play that are, I'll give you example, which is, say you are bound and blindfolded, and you hear the sound of a phone's camera. There's an enormous uncertainty in that moment, whether it's been discussed or not, or whether it was instantly deleted, or whether, you know, your partner was taking a picture of the, you know, the ceiling. But there is a huge, in effect, mindfucks are a combination of not undermining, that's the wrong word, of introducing a little uncertainty into the trust you have with a partner, and a big part of the relief is reinforcing that trust at the end of it. It is, the childlike equivalent is the excitement that comes from, and I have a 3-year-old, so this is what leaps to mind. She loves running off the edge of a booth for me to catch her. Now, something could go wrong. Chances are I'm going to catch her. Otherwise, I would stop her. But the excitement comes from that moment of uncertainty when she's in the air. And so that's sort of the edge of the thing slide in. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Does that help any?
Kind of.
That was a perfectly
yeah.
acceptable answer.
Theoretically, yes, but emotionally, for me, no. If I say to somebody, under no circumstances do this, and I trust them enough to play with them, then even if they're simulating it, I know they're not doing it.
Yes,
And
but
so why would I react to that?
right, and in a lot of cases, it is things that either haven't been discussed, or are soft limits, or are things that are, I very much like mindfucks that have something about not the actual interaction being some edgy thing, but their emotional response being a source of shame, and sort of playing up on that. But hold that thought, because we will loop back around to Tizzy, and I suspect other people want to pitch in with sort of their thoughts on this. So Rick is next.
To me, there's 2 layers to answering this question. One is, and Rick, the other Rick of Rick Squared touched on this, that there's a far cry between something that's a hard limit and something that's fear level 10 that Tandy has said, I'm placing this firmly in your hands. It's fear level 10. It scares the living shit out of me, but I'm placing it in your hands. So there's a far cry between these 2 things. The other thing is that trust itself is we talk about trusting partners and immersing ourselves slowly, and yet we get on the freeway and trust a painted set of lines to separate us from other human beings that probably shouldn't be real. To me, mindfuckery is the relationship between a magician and his victim. After I do a few card tricks for you and show you that I'm a good magician, you may very well volunteer to get in the box and get sawed in half, even though if your partner asked you to get in a box and he was going to saw you in half, you know, hell no, I have a limit against mutilation, and yet because you've seen a few card tricks, now all of a sudden you're willing to get into a box and get sawed in half. And even though we all know the magician isn't really going to saw the girl in half, we're all amazed at the trick. So I think mindfuckery and magic acts have a lot in common. I was fortunate enough to study some of the masters when I was a lad, so I know quite a bit about magic and misdirection, and it's an opportunity. Magic is a mindfuck all in its own, and I think that mindfucks SM have a lot in common with.
Yes, and there's different forms of magic and different forms of mindfuckery. But I had not put that together. But that is very true. That in effect, magic is a subversion of the accepted shared reality. And
Thank you, Surik. My master's told me that he would lie to me in a minute for a scene or a mindfuck on the play side. He will lie, but on the relationship side, he won't. And being sort of on the edge of that fear at all times in a scene is something that I think my master would relish as well as I would. So I hope that he will lie to me on the play side, and that he will deceive and trick and do all of those things. But it doesn't diminish my trust on the relationship side. And something that you, Sir Rick, said when you were speaking reminded me of something that might actually kind of help illustrate this. When you were talking about your child trusting you, jumping off the edge of something and expecting you to catch them. And I was thinking, children believe in Santa Claus, and as adults, we sort of contribute to that conspiracy and keep them believing as long as possible. And we lie to them, week after week during the holiday season, especially when they're younger, and just, hope that nobody, blows it like an older sibling or somebody at school. And it doesn't break our child's trust, or break a child's trust in their parents or in the adults around them to still catch them when they're jumping off the edge of that thing, or when they're asking a question about something. They still believe what their parents say, when they're asking about, Mommy, why is the sky blue? Or, Mommy, is that bird, did that bird die? When they see, a bird on the ground or something, they still believe the things that you tell them when you say, yeah, the bird died. Or, the sky's blue, because and you tell them the scientific thing, if they're old enough to understand that, they don't lose the trust in you on the relationship side. And I think, most people can look back at their childhood and when they first discovered that, Santa Claus, wasn't real, and they, it's sort of like you feel like, sorry, Willow, you sort of, you don't look at your parents like, those liars, they were telling me all these years they were Santa. You kind of feel like you're in on the secret then instead. So you don't lose that trust. And that's kind of how I feel about, mindfuckery within the DS dynamic. And I'm done. Thank you.
and that is the hope from the dominant side. That you are suspension of disbelief, as Tizzy put it, or that the mindfuck is a collaborative act. Maybe another way to put it. Willow.
Hi. All this time I thought my mic was off. God, I hope I wasn't making like really stupid noises in the background. To answer Tizzy's question, because you were asking what's in it for the mind, like why a mindfuck, like how do you get there, or what's the point? I'm going to try to explain it, so bear with me, because I'm a visual thinker. I'm a switch, and depending on who I'm with depends on the role that I take. I tend to be a submissive who likes to top because I'm also a sadist, but that's where I kind of fall. But it gives me an opportunity to at least see both sides of the mind, of where I might fall. I've got a very busy brain. I'm a very smart human being. I'm one that can tell you how a book's going to end. I'm going to be able to tell you how the movie's going to end. I'm going to tell you who ends up with who. I'm the person that looks around a room and can see by where people are standing what's going on. That's my brain. It never stops, ever. That's not true. It doesn't stop often. One of the beauty of a mindfuck, when it's in a trusted dynamic, and I really, really, really like the way that it was just being explained, because yes, you can trust your parents or you can trust your trusted people, even though they may have told you something that sets up a situation. A mindfuck, the joy of it for someone with a busy brain like me, and this is just me, is that when it's done well, when it's done right, it has the ability to stop time. It has the ability to be in the middle of that space, fully immersed with the rest of it, with all that fucking noise, just going the fuck away. And you can do that when the person who's giving you the mindfuck is someone that you trust implicitly with your whole sense of self, because you're free. And that's the kind of thing, like Rose, I see you saying, yes, if you get that release of that in a submissive frame of mind, in a bottom frame of mind, it is so still, so as close to what I would define as a perfect moment. And it's hard because you don't find people often in life that you can trust to that kind of ability. And sometimes it's more than just a scene. Yes, it's like a cleansing. If you have a scene and you know that you're going to be doing knife play today, it's not really that edgy because you kind of know a mindfuck is bigger than that. A mindfuck, it's encompassing if it's done well and it's done right and it's done in a power exchange, in my opinion, and again, just my opinion. I'm totally fine with people not agreeing. You're blending that psychological with that physical, and it's just really fucking awesome, and that's the best that I can describe it as. But yes, a reset. Hot, and I'm done. I'm gonna go fan myself now. Woo!
Nicely put. Rosa.
That was so well said. You did just an amazing job capturing for me what is the essence of mindfuck. I don't think I can say it any better than you can, but I'll place it in my own context and my own experience. I love mindfuckery. I love it for me because it's hot. I love the intellectual and the psychological elements used to, applied to deepen the emotional and the physical elements of DS. Whether it's something as simple as, on your knees, go fetch me your belt, bring it to me, set it where I can use it, and then I don't touch it because I have other things in mind, or something more complex, I'm going to have you stand and recite 40 names for your cock, taken from historical references. Practice this for the next week. And then, in fact, what I do is have a recital of I'm a Little Teapot. I use it to crack open experience, to bring somebody more into the present moment, less in the busy noise of their mind. I use it to lay seeds for where we're going as we deepen our dynamic and our journey together. Back at you. And just that sense of aliveness. Time stops. We're here together. The energy exchange is flowing and it's fucking magic. Thanks for that illusion, that connection with magic. It's part of what we do. I'm done.
The belt one is especially lovely. And in fact, one can define a mindfuck as bait and switch. It's like magic. It is the building up of a certain expectation and then subverting it in a way that is exciting. Yeah, that's a big part of it. And it is.
Kind of jealous how you're all talking so passionately about it. And, and I just don't think it would work for me, but because it's all very like the top knows that the bottom knows that the top knows that it's not really real, so you know it's that I'm just really stuck on that it is just it's not real. So why would you react to something that's not real? But yes, it's very lovely to hear how passionate you're all talking about. I'm a bit jealous, but
and here's an example that doesn't sort of subvert that. It subverts an expectation, but not a trust or not a limit, and that is roughly taking a partner, forcing her down on the bed, binding her open so she's exposed, all in an expectation, completely nonverbal, of a rough sex experience, and then spending the next half hour gently touching. That, in effect, she has been primed for one thing and gets a different one, especially blindfold. And then when she is beyond the need for release, giving her one really good, strategically placed slap to put her over the edge.
That's only going to work with somebody that enjoys both, I suppose.
Yes, yeah, and it absolutely has to be tailored to your partner, who you need to know well, yes, this is not, you don't meet someone at a bar and go, hi, want to mind fuck? It is, no shoes, want to mind fuck? Yes, this is very much, play, and I've had entire relationships where it never came up. It isn't for everyone, and not be awarded that way. It's fun. Willow.
Question. Are you looking at it from a submissive or a dominant or a switch standpoint? Just because I'm curious, and you don't have to answer, but I'm being nosy. Tizzy.
Bottom.
Okay.
Submissive, yeah.
Okay, then do you ever watch a TV show or a series, and it ends up ending completely different than you thought it was going to? And you leave it going, holy fucking shit, I didn't see that coming. If you have, it's that kind of feeling that would make you either possibly be interested or not, and I'm not trying to sell you, I'm just trying to put it in an outside context kind of way to give you something that you might be able to look at and go, oh, okay, I get that, or, I don't like that crap either. So the mindfuck, even if it ends up not being physical, you can still have a mental mindfuck that can give you that kind of feeling. And depending on the dynamic, a submissive could mindfuck his or her dominant. Really, if that's how they play, because you could have dominants who still like to bottom and submit. Like, you can mix it lots of different ways, but there's plenty of ways of mind fucking. Depending on the nature, you could very much mind fuck by saying no.
Well, isn't playing into a mind fuck a mind fuck?
It could be. But then who's leading the mind fuck? And that in itself could be very interesting.
And, let me just...
And I'm done. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I sort of just jumped in. The two classic modern mindfuck movies are Usual Suspects and Memento, where they both had sort of completely unexpected endings. They at least fooled me, and but those are the two sort of classics. Rick.
Well, to illustrate the reality of mindfucks, so to speak, there's a darker side to mindfucks. The CIA uses mindfuckery to get information out of people, and it's very real, it's very dark, and it's very effective that the person being manipulated thinks situations are worse. I realize we're talking about consensual, but I'm just saying that mindfuckery can go to any level the people that are involved in it want to take it to, and there is a very real side to mindfuckery, to psyops, and it's very effective, and I'm done.
That is certainly true. So? Okay. For instance, my dominant had me get clothespins before we seen. I trusted him and had no idea what they were for, as we'd never used them. In the time between getting them and using them, I was mindfucked. The fear and excitement of what might happen was there. I trust him and I know he's not going to harm me, but the fear of the unknown was and can be exciting. Super oversimplified, but there you go. Rosa. And yes, that's a
Oh, I had to get my mic back on. Ooh,
Welcome
I
in.
love what Celestial just said. That was great. I'm thinking about the unbelievable, suspend the unbelievable. For me, a satisfying mindfuck isn't going to be from the realm of the unbelievable. It's going to be absolutely believable, given who I am as a dominant and the things I enjoy. It's going to be outside of where I have gone with that particular submissive, that particular or it's going to be in a place I know is difficult for that person to go to. So let's take the bestiality thing. I would absolutely going to take Sarah over to the bestiality dog lounge that isn't here to breed her publicly. Oh, she'd love it. But so many would not. But taking them there and telling them how I'm going to turn them out, what I'm going to say, how I am going to invite others to participate, and then actually taking them and then saying, oh, I changed my mind, not today, maybe a week, is going to provide me with a satisfying experience. And it's going to teach some important lessons, and it's going to do that cracking open the knowing universe for that submissive. Just teasing Sarah, I say, smiling sweetly. So, I'm going to have one foot in what's believable and what's possible, whether in Second Life or real life. But the other foot, it's going to be beyond the scope of knowing. Thanks. I'm done. I'm sorry, I was talking still. Let me go back and read what you said, Tizzy. I think you're commenting on my comment. Suspension of disbelief isn't about the unbelievable. It's about buying into the idea even though you know it's going to be safe. Thanks, Tizzy. I'm done.
And that is, yeah, well, let me put it this way. If you didn't know you were going to be safe, it would be way harder to get excited. Although, for some of the darker play and edge play, that line can get fuzzy. But that's sort of a different conversation. Willow, you took your comment back?
I did.
Okay.
Although now I have another one, because you just made me think of it.
Go for it.
But edge play kind of is the ultimate mindfuck, especially the longer it goes that you're denied, because you never know what you're going to be able to do or not to do going into it. And you might, and yes, could you know? Yes, maybe. What did you have for breakfast? Who knows? And it is a mindfuck because you don't know how it's going to go. It's like a long, painfully delicious kind of mindfuck. Yes, and now I'm done.
Another way, yes, and in fact that prompted a thought for me, which is another way of thinking of a mindfuck is really it's just an advanced form of anticipation. It is cranking the combination of not being sure exactly where it's going and anticipating what's going to happen up to sort of 11. And that is I have an old joke about partners about making them write out their limits and telling them anything you say can and will be used for you and against you. And it is something that, and it doesn't, limit play is not necessarily something that I'm all over, but it is a nice jumping off point for finding out how far one can go and still have your partner emotionally safe. Rick?
Yeah, I always tell Tandy the most sadistic thing I do is listen, and then I insist that she communicate with me. So I guess she's been mindfucked since day one, in a way, and I'm done.
Amen. That's a big deal. Okay. This might be probably a little over than expected, so let's draw to a close here. I think my homework is to try to figure out different ways to explore mindfuckery to share with Tizzy. So, are there any other thoughts, comments, criticisms, questions? Fuck my mind, win a prize! Thank you, Rosie. Thank you all for coming and participating. Yeah, we'll do it again next week. If you have any ideas or anything you want to bring up, feel free to shoot me an IM, and I'll be happy to explore. So thank you all again. Fair enough.